Hello and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at the current edition of the North Coast Journal. My name is Ruby Cayenne, and we are joined as usual by the North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson. Welcome, Thad. It's great to have you.
Hey, Ruby. It's great to be here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing lovely. Weather isn't super sunny, but I'm not letting it stop me. Trying to get my walks in, you know.
There's been the glimpses of sunshine, and it's been kind of oddly muggy. I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah, I hope we don't get I hope this doesn't turn into Miami, is all I can say.
Yeah, indeed.
So let's get right to it. Thad, do you want to tell us what's on the cover this week for the North Coast Journal?
Yeah, this week we actually busted format a little bit. We don't have our traditional kind of long form cover story, but what we have on the cover is a wonderful food story by Jessica Ashley Silva, a regular freelancer and food writer for the Journal, and I'm filling in for Jennifer Miko Cahill, our arts and features editor, who's taken some time off. And when this story came in from Jessica, it just had these beautiful, beautiful mushroom pictures with it. And Jessica's a very talented photographer, and I just kind of fell in love with these photos and figured maybe we could just put them on the cover and have a food story on the cover this week. So this is what happens when Jen leaves me alone, is I blow up the format and do different things. But so we have the story that's about mushroom foraging here in the North Coast, and kind of the bounty of fungi that are at our fingertips all year round. And have you ever foraged mushrooms locally?
I have. I grew up on a property in between Trinidad and McKinleyville, and that was a yearly event that my father and I would do, was to peruse the property looking for mushrooms. And as an adult, I'm trying to get back into it. My grandfather-in-law is super into the mycology stuff, so I'm hoping he'll take me out.
Excellent. So I've been a couple times with a friend that I've somewhat fallen out of touch with, and I really enjoyed it, and I really want to go out again, but I'm also nervous to pick something that might poison me. So I need to find a good expert locally to take me out. But Jessica is well versed in this, so she talks about kind of the different from chanterelles to shaggy manes to boletes, just kind of all of the various mushroom offerings on the North Coast, and then has two wonderful recipes. And I actually, because I got this early in order to edit it and put it in the paper, I was inspired and actually made both of these recipes last weekend. Our 11-year-old daughter is away at sleepaway camp, and she is decidedly anti-mushroom. So we decided to seize the day while she was gone and eat as many mushrooms as possible. And so I didn't go out foraging, but I went to the farmer's market and picked up some wonderful mushrooms to make. She has a kind of a fluff pastry recipe, and then a wonderful quiche, and both of them turned out fantastic. The quiche has a tater tot crust, which I'd never made before, but I have to say it was wonderfully delicious and really simple.
That sounds really delicious and lovely. I'm gonna have to try those myself, and it'll just be me eating it because my fiance, similar to your daughter, in that he is anti-mushroom, but
they're missing out.
Yeah, they're missing out.
Both recipes are well worth making, even if you're just cooking solo. I personally could have gorged the whole quiche without looking back. I was glad I had some help, but they're very good. So I'd encourage folks to check them out. And like I said, if people are gun shy to go foraging themselves, or don't feel like they have the knowledge base to do it, we're very fortunate that our local farmers markets have a bevy of local mushroom offerings, most of them anyway. So you can pick them up there and go home and enjoy.
Yeah, we've luckily got quite a few experts around here, which is awesome. So that takes that equation out of potentially losing your life over a delicious meal.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants that. So best to be safe.
Absolutely. That is a great, excellent story with great recipes, beautiful photos. Do you have any final thoughts about this story that people should know?
Just that it's to me, it's one of these food stories that it really is kind of the best of the North Coast. It's just a really locally sourced dishes that really highlight some of the bounty of living here, which I always appreciate those recipes.
I'm excited to try them myself. I've been a mushroom fiend, as I mentioned, since a young child. I was at a wedding, actually, quick little story, as a kid, and Ben and Jerry came to the wedding with ice cream in their trunk when they were still traveling around to sell it, and they offered some to me, and I had a plate of mushrooms in my hand, and I said, "No, thank you, I'm good. I've got my mushrooms." So,
That is a fantastic story. You might be the only person ever to refuse refuse Ben and Jerry's in favor of mushrooms, but.
oh my goodness. Yeah, I think now it might have been a little different, but that was how it went. So, moving on, we have some really interesting stuff for news this week that people definitely should be knowing about, and I'd love to hear about that. We've got some things happening with Planco.
Yeah, the Planning Commission took up a long anticipated matter at this point. The subject of local developer Travis Schneider's permits for his kind of highly publicized mansion that is under construction or was under construction on Walker Point Road, just overlooking the Fay Slough Wildlife Area, kind of south of Bayside. And as you know, regular viewers, readers, listeners will recall, Mr. Schneider's property kind of became the focal point of a lot of controversy after an let's see, August 2022 Planning Commission hearing in which the then Commission Chair Alan Bongio said a lot of things that were really offensive to local tribes and accused three local Wiyot area tribes specifically of kind of operating in bad faith and trying to extort Travis Schneider for more concessions. And and so that kind of blew this project into public view, and then that came to a hearing then because Mr. Schneider had violated some of the terms of his permits, and then after kind of in the full light of day with all this attention and scrutiny on the project, it was then determined that he violated a whole bunch more provisions of his permit, and so really for almost the last year now, this project has been kind of out of the public eye as Travis Schneider, the California Coastal Commission, Blue Lake Rancheria, the Wiyot tribe, and county planning staff have tried to kind of negotiate some agreement that would address the code violations and fix them and to the satisfaction of the Coastal Commission and the tribes. And they finally reached an accord a couple months ago, and this meeting was the Planning Commission kind of finally taking that up and approving the permits and permit modifications needed to kind of carry out that plan. And that plan, it will see Travis Schneider remove the parts of his house that are under construction, take out a lot of fill dirt that was brought into the property, and then kind of return the property to what they call a natural grade. And so basically try to make it look as much as possible like it did before he started construction activities there.
Things are shifting finally after this long process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long, convoluted story to follow, and I mean to cover, and I imagine much more to follow for readers. I think the big takeaways though are this is this was a prominent local developer who was building under what's called an alternative owner builder permit, which is essentially just a normal building permit, but it carries with it a lot less oversight from county planning staff than your typical building permit. And the idea behind these is that it's somebody who has a background in construction and is capable of building their own home, but then also that they're planning to occupy the home so that county building staff doesn't have to take as much of an oversight role to make sure that the place is inhabitable and stuff, because the thinking is that this is a professional who's going to do it well and live in it. So what that means, though, is there's a lot less site inspections and a lot less checks and balances as the builder goes through the process. And so, it's really come to light in in this case is that there was really no oversight from the county, and to the point that Mr. Schneider located his house being constructed on a site that was different than what the plans said they would be. And so that's really what landed him in a whole lot of trouble with the California Coastal Commission, is that the actual building footprint of his house encroached upon a wetland setback, which then put the whole project kind of in the California Coastal Commission's jurisdiction. And then, of course, it was determined, that the house he was building was almost 3 times as bigger than it was permitted to be, that he hadn't gotten septic permits, that he'd begun construction without any permits at all, and the list kind of goes on and on. And, one of the things that I found interesting about reporting this outcome is what was agreed to at the Planning Commission meeting, and still has to go through a process, but essentially that Mr. Schneider is, like I say, going to remove all of this stuff and kind of construction impacts from the property. But then he's going to seek a lot line adjustment. The property is currently 2 parcels, and he's going to change the line splitting those 2 parcels so that the entirety of a Wiyot cultural site on the property is on one of those parcels. And then he's going to gift that parcel to some third-party entity, they haven't figured out who yet, who will then hold it for the use by these 3 Wiyot area tribes. And so this was agreed to in what's called a compliance agreement. So it basically, as I said, Mr. Schneider had faced all these code violations, and the county's code enforcement unit had cracked down and issued a notice of violation. And because of the extent of the violations, he faced really hefty penalties. So he faced fines of $40,000 a day for up to 90 days. So it's a total of $3.6 million. And when code enforcement takes an action like this, then the property owner can enter into a compliance agreement, which basically, is a compromise. They agree to do certain things to bring the property into conformance and make sure it's up to codes. And in exchange for kind of them voluntarily working with the county to do that, the county forgives some or all of the fines. And so in this case, Mr. Schneider is donating this property in exchange for forgiveness of all these fines. I found it somewhat interesting that, the parcel that he's donating is valued by, the county assessor's office at, I think, $160,000. So there's obviously a gigantic gap between $160,000 and $3.6 million. But I think it's also fair to point out that, this is a Wiyot cultural site, a former village site that has been long documented, has a ton of cultural and archaeological significance, and is essentially priceless. So I imagine, unfortunately, the tribe's historic preservation officers did not get back to me for the story, but I imagine they feel a great relief in kind of taking this site out of private ownership and having some stewardship over it going forward and access to it going forward.
Absolutely, yeah. And for those of us, which I hope there's others out there besides myself who feel navigating the jargon of the Humboldt County Planning Commission and so forth to be overwhelming and confusing, I'm sure the readers are so grateful to you for doing all of the grunt work and making something that's so digestible to understand what's going on, because that was a pretty monumental thing that happened with those entities. So
yeah, it's that's always something that we try to do here at the Journal, is we realize that so many, I think Planning Commission more so than most governmental bodies here, but so much of kind of the business that's carried out in the public's name at these commission meetings and stuff can just be so hard to follow for the average person, somebody who doesn't study county planning codes, and honestly, unless you have to, who would, right? And so one thing we always try to do with the Journal is really, as much as possible, kind of strip away the jargon and the legalese and make these kind of processes as understandable as possible for people. Because we think it's, they're important. These processes are being done in our name, on our behalf as residents of the county, and it's important that we understand them, follow them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that story, Thad. And I really suggest that people pick up the North Coast Journal and read the complete story because there's so many details in there that are really interesting and really important.
And it's one that, we'll continue to cover. The California Coastal Commission will have to okay these plans. And ultimately, I think they're looking about a little over a year timeline, if all goes according to plan, as far as when that site will be restored to its natural state and that parcel conveyed to the Wiyati area tribe. So it's definitely an ongoing story.
Well, we will keep our ears wide open for those updates. With another local entity, but not just local, there's some other things going on with PG&E. If you want to fill us in on that, Thad, that would be excellent.
Yeah, the story actually just kind of broke right as we were getting ready to go to press with this edition this week. But PG&E announced kind of that it's launching several pilot projects that it is hopeful will allow it to increase its grid capacity in southern Humboldt and the Eel River Valley areas by the end of next year, so by the close of 2024. Again, this is a new development and an ongoing story, one that we've been reporting on, I think, going back about a year, when local officials, again, about a year ago, were kind of jolted by this news from PG&E, or this advisement from PG&E, that basically the southern stretches of the county, both the southern Humboldt area and up through the Eel River Valley, had essentially kind of reached electric capacity for PG&E, and then it wasn't going to be able to accommodate requests for new hookups. And so, this was not only hugely concerning for anyone looking to, build a new home or start a new business in these areas, but really to local governments too. I mean, the city of Fortuna, for example, had plans to put in a large-scale business park as well as some residential subdivisions, and it appeared that all those plans were kind of on hold indefinitely. And I think the initial timeline that PG&E put out was like 10 years to improve the grid to the point where it could accommodate new hookup requests. Which again, for a municipality like Fortuna, I mean, not only is that just hugely inconvenient and stifling for its economy, but it also gets in the way of the city meeting state mandates as far as building more affordable housing and stuff like that. So local officials were really, really concerned. Then kind of there hasn't been much talk about it out of nowhere. This week, PG&E issued a press release saying that it was doing these pilot projects. And so, it's PG&E is a privately held company. It doesn't have to comply with records requests and kind of being as transparent as local governments do. So frankly, we're not entirely sure what these projects are that PG&E has announced it's doing. One of them is incorporating Tesla batteries, and so there will be some sort of energy storage component, which I imagine will allow it to store power in off-peak hours to be used during peak hours, which will allow it to increase overall capacity. And then they're doing work at a number of their substations that they and improvements to transmission lines and stuff like that they hope will improve capacity. And so the company, says that it was careful to say that it's testing these pilot projects. It's not kind of pledging that they're all going to work, but that if all goes according to plan by the end of 2024, it will be able to accommodate more electric hookups in, like I said, in both areas, southern Humboldt and the Eel River Valley. The company doesn't specify kind of what that means, how many, how much more capacity they're going to have, or any of those things. So it's a little bit cryptic at this point, but nonetheless, I think some good news for folks looking to develop those areas.
Definitely. I mean, Southern Humboldt's been that real deal off-grid living in most areas down there for a long time. So I'm curious what the reaction of the community is. I bet there's a lot of excitement.
Yeah, and I know, I mean, Southern Humboldt specifically was, residents there were concerned that the new Gerald Phelps Hospital construction would be derailed by this news from PG&E. I don't know that we've gotten a definitive answer of whether that will be the case or not, but yeah, certainly anything to increase capacity there is a huge positive.
Absolutely. Kind of give that community some more resources so that they don't have to travel all the way up to Eureka. I'm sure that would be really appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, Fortuna has been looking at this business park for years and years now, and actually just had I believe about 8 months ago had a new person take ownership of it who has some big plans, and so if this allows that to move forward, in a timely fashion, I know Merritt Berry, the city manager there, will be doing a quiet dance of joy in his office because he was very disappointed when it seemed like those plans would be put on hold indefinitely.
Well, really exciting news. There's so much to read about, and all of these stories are in full in the journal this week. So I suggest giving those a read. On the other end, if we could be moving towards things that are happening on the calendar, I think the calendar is looking pretty full this week, and I'm curious if there's anything that you want to point out.
Yeah, a couple things. First is this was on last week's calendar, but Annie and Mary Days out in Blue Lake took place this past weekend, and local photographer and regular journal contributor Mark Larson was out there. So we have a couple of his photos in this week's print edition, but then have a full slideshow online. So I'd really encourage people to check that out and yeah, and drink in the joy that was sunny Blue Lake for Annie and Mary Days. And then coming up this week, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Fortuna Rodeo. Fortuna is going to be bumping all week and weekend long with all kinds of rodeo events, from its chili cook-off and some live music and stuff like that to the rodeo events itself. Everything from gladiators, or not gladiators, quadiators. I have never actually been, but I hear they have quite the quad competition, and then to buck and broncos and the whole nine. So I would encourage people to pick up the journal and see the full rodeo schedule. I think Auto Expo is also coming up in Fortuna. So exciting times.
Definitely. It's been many, many years since I went and saw that rodeo, but I think that this might be the year for me. And I think that after COVID and everything, everyone should get themselves out the house and head down there. So it's happening.
Definitely. I think I'm a little bit ashamed to say, but I've never actually been down there for rodeo, but I hear it's a great time. And we should revisit this, but one of my favorite features that the journal did, this was ages ago, but we had a spread that was the fashion of Fortuna Rodeo. And Jen went down with a photographer and picked out, I don't know, maybe a dozen or so people who were just flossing in one way or another, and took a picture and talked to them about their wardrobe and where they got the items and stuff like that. It was neat. So maybe if you're gonna head down, dig that out of the archives, get some inspiration, get dressed to impress, and then go hit the Fortuna Rodeo.
Yeah, if there's a whole lineup like that, I don't want to disappoint, Got to see what people are stepping out in.
Exactly.
Well, lovely. Is there anything else you want to point out in the calendar? Or?
I guess the only thing I was going to mention is we do have a week also packed full of live music. So be sure and check out Colin Yo's set list this week if you have any inclinations on going out and catching a live band, because he has the full roundup and it's a rich week to choose from.
Will do. And everybody out there watching and listening, gotta go pick that up so you can see, because I know that there's many, many, many more things in there that we just cannot get to all of them today, so don't miss out. Well, thank you so much for that, Thad. And that is about all the time that we have for this week. There was a really full paper, lots of news, and the current edition of the North Coast Journal is on newsstands now. So go pick up a copy as soon as you can. They're all over Humboldt. And you can also find it 24/7 at thenorthcoastjournal.com. Thad, thank you so much. And thank you everyone who's watching or listening. We will see you all next week.